Welcome to the Creation Innovation Podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth King. Together, we'll have conversations with incredible human beings who have taken their creative outlet and turned it into something innovative. From people leaving the corporate world to be 8-figure entrepreneurs to people who have created books, created a family, or just creating to have fun in the world. We are all in a journey to create something amazing in our lives, and I hope that you find some inspiration of your own here. This is the Creation Innovation Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to Creation Innovation. Today we have Kyle Ridley, who is an Emmy-winning journalist with a diverse background in writing, producing, booking, and interviewing and editing. Welcome, Kyle. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Finally, get to talk to
Yes.
you after all these years of doing segments with you.
I know. So Kyle and I don't even know how we actually got together initially. If it was, I don't know if we just randomly pitched you guys or what.
No, yeah, I'd have to go back to like my old emails from years ago. I feel like someone might have recommended me to you or following you, or maybe an old anchor was like, this girl would be great to talk to about this. But yeah, you were fantastic right away. So I kept you going.
Well, I'm so grateful for that. But also in those interactions, recognized this is such a crazy job that you have as a producer. And, being a fan of the morning show, which is my only,
Yes.
insight into all of that world, I thought, let's have you on and talk about that and how does that look? And also just kind of your personal life. And I know you've been open about your personal life and what you're going through recently, but I know and I want to speak for you, but I know some of our jobs that we come to have an influence on how our personal lives go. And I'm just curious if there's
Yeah.
any overlap there. So first of all, how did you get into producing and journalism and everything that you do now?
Yeah, it was started out in high school, where a group of students in my journalism class. Well, first I took journalism, so I always had an interest in writing. That was like my main passion starting out. So was in journalism class like 11th and 12th grade, and I think I remember my senior year of high school. It might have been my junior. A select couple of the journalism students were brought to a local paper to start like a student column that they were doing that semester,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was doing like random like entertainment pieces, or I even started like a poetry corner back then. And then I kept in touch with my editor from that local paper. It was I think it was the Manassas Journal Messenger back in the day. Like
Mm-hmm.
most papers, it's no longer. But was always writing, and then maintained my ties with those local papers throughout my 20s. And in college, I majored in journalism and public relations. My senior year of college, I went to LA and interned at NBC in their investigative unit. And I also interned at CBS Paramount on the Dr. Phil show.
Mm-hmm.
And that was back in
Is he still
2009.
going? I don't even know.
He's not going anymore. No.
No. Okay.
But that was back in like 2008, 2009 at the height of the recession and just graduating back then. I ended up moving back home and falling into, as DC goes, more government work, government
Right.
contracting, government, a lot of technical writing and editing. So it like kind of would tie into journalism and writing, but it wasn't like what I was passionate about. So
Mhm.
it really was when I turned 30, got married, sort of had fulfilled everything in my personal life and was doing well career wise, like working from home, making good money. But I had nothing to complain about, but I didn't have like my passion wasn't being itched. So I was like, let me try to start over, try to go back into TV. And so started networking on LinkedIn, sending letters to different editors and executive producers, and landed at local ABC in DC via a LinkedIn like connection, talking with an
Awesome.
EP. He brought me into Shadow, and then he hired me as a segment producer and worked my way up the ranks to line producing and writing, and then took over several shows at my old station. And then this year moved over to local Fox, so which is number one in the DC area. So I've been doing that for about 8 years now.
And how is that? I mean, is it really what it looks like on TV from the morning show and
Morning
all of these
shows.
things like the back end? Because I feel like we obviously as the consumer see what we see, but it's very rare that we have an idea of what you guys are all doing on the back end. And from somebody who's been on several shows, I know now, like, they can contact you any time of day or night, whatever's happening,
Yeah.
all the things. So it seems like, when do you guys ever stop working, first of all? And how is that?
Yeah, it can definitely be all consuming, especially when you own your own hour. So usually a producer is like in charge of their own hour, especially in local TV where you're doing 15 hours of news a day. So like for instance, at my local station now and at my old station, I was in charge of the 9 a.m. hour. And when you look at the morning show or the Today Show or Good Morning America, they have dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of people on that team. And they have like groups of producers that are in charge of working on one segment. In local TV, you often have maybe one writer, one producer, one booker, and in many cases you have none. So you're like a one-man show. So at my old
Right.
station at ABC, I was booking 4 or 5 guests a day and writing the show, building the rundown in the control room. There's not as many resources. So yeah, you are glued to your phone and doing the morning show. My alarm for the past several years is 3 a.m.,
Oh
3:30
my
a.m.
gosh. And do you
And
just
yeah,
get used to that? Like,
it takes a while to develop your own routine. A lot of anchors that have to wake up at that hour, they go to bed at 5. I'm not really built that way, especially when you talk about personal life and the impact it can have.
right,
So I've gotten into a routine of napping every day after work, and that allows me to at least stay up till, maybe 9, maybe 10. But yeah, as far as the all-consuming aspect, you are kind of glued to your phone. So that's something I've had to work on and at times have struggled with, like putting the phone down, not always worrying about who can I get on the next day, what's breaking, what's trending, uh, because it can take a toll. It can take a toll on your
right,
mental well-being, your physical well-being, just your, it's a high pressure. You have no down day in a live TV news environment. You have no, oh, this is a light day I can breeze through. No, you have to go in and you have to have a show written and produced by 9 a.m. every day because you're going to be live. So,
right.
uh,
I mean,
yeah.
the stress level as well, is it seemingly as stressful as as we would think? Or
It
once you're
can
in the
be.
groove of it, are you like, no, I got this. Like, it's fine.
I feel like I got this, knowing that things are always going to be thrown your way and curveballs are going to happen, especially in a live news environment where there's breaking news. Or yesterday, Trump is arriving at New York City court during my show, so we're having
Oh,
to cut stuff to go to those live photos and talk over it. Here's the motorcade on the way. Here he is arriving at court. So maybe we
right,
have to kill weather or kill a news story, or in some cases when everything's blowing up you have to send people home, or Zoom interviews. Hey, we have to reschedule this. We're having to
right,
breaking coverage. Weather is also big. If there's a big storm or a snowstorm, a lot of things get blown out for that. Next year is going to be huge with the election and the trials, and it's a lot. Right now we're doing a lot of strike coverage, so there's never any shortage of stuff to cover. But the thing that I love about my job and my specific hours that I do is it bridges the gap from that hard news to the lighter side.
right,
Where if you watch the Good Morning America or Today Show, it starts out pretty hard, and then through the morning we get more light, we get fun, we get drinks, we get celebrities. So
right.
that's what I like about my job. And my favorite part is being able to book guests like you and being able to bring them on, share their stories. You only get like 3 or 4 minutes, but it can make a really big impact, and you can, it's posted online, it can spread all over the world, and it's cool to see some people that I've booked over the years show up in other places on TV and
Right.
national shows.
I had a Google alert this week actually on the segment that I just did with you guys that was completely non-related to what, it was like a post as an ad, I think, on some Australian or South African, something
Wow.
about fertility. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah,
But
good
I think,
coverage.
to that point, it's so impactful to be able to have the platform that you have, and in such a major market, which is pretty cool, right? I mean, you just happen to be from that area, but also, as people may or may not know, there's tiers of markets of news and coverage and whatnot, and DC is one of those.
Yeah, I
Wow.
I am very fortunate to the executive producer that hired me at ABC because DC is a top 10 market. I think it's 6 or 7. And the the track that most people do is after college, you apply all over the country and you start out in really small town markets. You usually have to move.
Right.
You're there for a year or two, and then you move on to a mid-level. And it takes a few years, but you work your way up. But to be able to start in DC, I feel very fortunate because we have interns every semester, and they graduate, and we see, oh, they're ending up in some city I've never heard of.
Right.
But then,
Right.
2 years later, some are in New York or some are in. So that's one thing about
Yeah.
producing is there's always positions open. Uh, Sometimes you just have to be ready to move. And so that's when the personal life can sort of take a toll. But when you're young and you're 20 and you're willing to go anywhere, then you have much more freedom with that.
Right. So is again back to the question of relationship and all of that. You said you were able to kind of sort it out so that you were able to nap and have a normal be up till a normal time. I'm barely make it to 9 myself and I don't have to wake up at 3. But do you feel like that has had any impact on your relationships in the past as far as your schedule and whatnot?
Yes, and I was married. I was married for 8 years, and we were together 12 years. And so from by the time I was pre-TV to going back into TV, so they were around for all my schedule shifts, and it definitely took a toll. I did go. Went to started going to therapy many years ago, and then couples counseling, and I have. It's been a goal of mine over the last few years, several years, to really strike that work-life balance, and I haven't
Yes.
achieved it fully, but I've definitely gotten a lot better at putting the phone down or realizing things can wait. Also, delegating is a huge thing that I've had an issue with, and I've had to learn to be like, you're one person, there are competent people, trust that they can get the job done as well. Yeah, but
Yeah, that's
it's
tough
been
though.
difficult. Yeah.
Right. So another thing that I wanted to chat with you about that you've been open about is your eating disorder and what that looks like. And I'm, so happy to see that you were open about that because a lot of men are not. And being a mom of 3 boys and a few nephews that have kind of struggled with things here and there, where it's not so um, I guess, openly spoken about in circles of men or boys for that matter.
Mhm.
But more and more, I feel like it's becoming more common. How do you see this and kind of what made you feel the need to talk about that publicly?
I would say the last year, this whole year, starting probably in January, everything was sort of thrown for a loop for me. Where the end of last year, I left my last job and was planning on taking a couple months off and meeting with a lot of people and finding a best fit, even if it was like across the country, and just sort of wanted to take my time away from that early schedule. And then as I was leaving my last job, this station contacted me and offered me a job before I'd even left. So I figured might as well stay. It is home. It's the number one market. If I'm going to go anywhere, I'd go there. And then also at the very end of last year, right before Christmas or right after Christmas, I separated from my husband, and
Mm.
so we're divorced at this point. But the whole new year started out with separating, getting a new job, and just all this change. And I think in the grand scheme, with so much
Those are two
emotional
two of the, I think, 4 major life
two big life changes, and in a way
changes.
it just made so much more of my life in the grand scheme. Just like, why am I holding on to stuff that is more of a burden, I think, than you know I, I always hear that the difference between like secrecy and privacy is about levels of respect, where secrecy there's a lot of shame attached. And
Right.
every year, April 1st is sort of, I would I don't want to say like sobriety year, because I will forever be conscious of food and what I'm eating, and body conscious. I think it's sort of natural. But as far as binging and purging, it was 9 years ago, April 1st of this year. And so on April 1st, I was just like, this needs to be the year. Every year I sort of debate sharing it or being saying something. And I just was like, I don't care anymore. It's sort of like when you hear people say the older you get, you don't care what people think or things
Right,
aren't as big of a deal.
right.
We're going through real life stuff and I don't need to hide this. But yeah, especially with men, it's just not talked about. But it's very prevalent, and especially in the gay community, it's very prevalent. When I've spoken with my friends about it, we all hold some sort of self-image issue, and a lot of it is taught at a very young age. And I'm the oldest of seven
Oh my
boys.
goodness. Wait, what?
I know, seven boys,
No girls.
no girls.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
Kyle, that's insane.
yeah. And I just was like, I can share my story. I'm doing well. I don't, and if people don't want to hear it, they don't need to read it, or they can block me. There was no, I just felt like there was more shame attached in not sharing it. And so it was just time.
Well, again, it's such a need in so many ways. And I think opening the conversation to that, as well as men's fertility, as I always talk about, it's kind of another one of those things that guys just don't talk about. And it's happening all the time. And especially in it's more openly talked about in the gay community because it's an obvious situation that needs to happen, right? I mean, obviously.
Mhm.
However, on the other side of the fence, it's not so much and it becomes a very shameful thing, but really so many men are going through it. And the more that we have these conversations and are open about it, of just it's a normal thing, and more people than we think are struggling with something. And I think there's varying degrees, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, um, that we all go through, right? Some of us are born of families that have situations with issues around food or eating disorders or whatever. So it's always going to be a level of consciousness around it, but it might not be as drastic. So, what kind of got you to this point of recognizing I really need to 9 years ago that I need to shift this and this is not healthy. I can't go on this way.
I think fear. I think fear of one, losing the relationship that I was in, fear of just living a lie for the rest of my life, as sort of each year would go by where you sort of vow to get better, uh, sort of almost like a New Year's resolution, but it would almost be monthly or weekly, sort of like diets. I'm going to start Monday. I'm not going to do this. I'm
Right.
not going to do this. And just to see how the older I was getting and how I was hiding, I think any time you find yourself hiding, then
Mm,
there's something that needs to be addressed. And
I know.
I
I see
hid
that
for
even with my
years.
little ones sometimes of like, they'll like sneak a cookie and I'm like, no, you don't need to do that. Like it's okay because
Yeah.
that's my fear. Like I don't want them to go into this mindset of like, in order to have this.
Yeah, and I was hiding from everyone, and it just it sort of piled up where people were starting to catch on, especially my mom and my ex-husband. And it just sort of like it wasn't an intervention, but it was a just a talk between my husband and I. And I just felt like, yeah, I need to seek professional help, and otherwise I'm going to lose everything.
And do you
Not
know,
sustainable.
yeah, do you know where it stemmed from for you? Like, was it clear to you of like, okay, I'm doing this because of that sort of thing?
Well, in therapy, you learn a lot about how a lot of it is just about control and anxiety and comforting yourself by filling yourself up when everything else around you seems sort of out of control. You can sort of fill that void in that way, and it almost soothes you. And then you're also controlling, hey, I can do all this, eat all this, and I'm not going to gain weight because I'll get rid of it. And that's another form of control. But I think as far as where it stems is, other than growing up in a culture that really makes everyone feel like you have to be, especially in the 90s, heroin chic and small. And uh, I would say it's really stems a lot from my family dynamics, just seeing people in my family struggle with weight or make comments about weight all the time, or always being on
Mhm.
a diet and restricting, witnessing a family member throwing up at a young age and not knowing what it was, and learning about what it was and experimenting with it, yourself, knowing it's bad, but also knowing this is sort of an easy out, or maybe that's my trick to, eat and not worry about it. And I also grew up in a family that has a lot of weight fluctuations, and some people are really athletic and some people are overweight. And I think it was always looked negatively upon being overweight.
Right.
Even if people say, "Oh no, you look great. You don't need to worry about that." When you hear someone around you comment on themselves, how they look, and you think they look fantastic, and they're smaller than you, it
Right.
plays with your mind, as a elementary school, middle schooler for sure.
Right. And the reason I ask that is for anybody who's listening that may be in alignment with that and can resonate with some of those things, and or if you have children, to be aware of and conscious of how you talk about food and weight and all the things around the people that are you, because that's how we get these downloads of what is normal. And I would say those children, or we, right, because I am one of
Hmm.
those children as well, that becomes our tribe. So we want to associate with what we think is normal, and sometimes it's normal to be saying, talking about food that you can have, can't have, good food, bad food, how much you
Hmm.
weigh, how much you don't weigh, what size your jeans are, whatever, right? Like the
Yeah.
kids take that all in and that affects them. So just kind of being aware of those conversations and how it's not only affecting, again, traditionally we would think it was just the girls that matters to, and now there's this huge influx of boys and men that it is affecting. And you mentioned the gay community. Why do you think it's even more so there?
I think there's a big part of the gay community where it's almost expected that you're going to be showing more skin.
Mm,
And if it's not being really thin, it's people that are addicted to going to the gym and having the perfect six pack. And,
mhm.
maybe they're restricting, but and spending hours and hours in the gym to perfect that body, because they feel like they're being judged by their peers. And in some cases, they are. Uh, and also on TV. uh, I sort of liken it to like being like that best friend on a TV show. You're not the main character. It's just sort of that sloppy best friend, or that it's looked down upon. But I wish that narrative would change. Yeah, and also just I didn't know anything about nutrition growing up. Neither did my family. I think it's very common, maybe in the 80s and 90s, families just we weren't aware of what was bad, what was good. And I think the bad and good label isn't appropriate, but we weren't aware of like what's in salad dressing, or we think it's healthy, and then we still are gaining weight. And I think that the good and the bad foods, I wish we could eliminate that mindset, because that's where I was stuck. And
Completely.
I didn't really learn about nutrition until my eating disorder and trying to recover, because then you sort of become focused on calories and reading nutrition labels and doing your
Right.
own research. So in a sense, that's beneficial, that you do learn what are healthy foods, but then that can also tilt into the extreme of being orthorexic and only focusing on examining every label. And
What is orthorexic?
I think it's when it's I want to get it right, but it's when you are like overly healthy, like examining every little thing that goes in your
Okay.
body. Is there like a gram of sugar in this? I won't eat it. It
Right.
almost borders into like raw foods, and very natural, like obsession about it, where
Right.
it's just not healthy, where you're not even allowing a bite of something. And that's one
Mhm.
thing, and especially with so many nutrition segments I've booked, that everything should be on the table. Everything is okay. You can have a cookie. You don't need to eat. One thing that I've learned is you can have a cookie, and if you have that cookie, it doesn't mean all is lost and you need the whole bag of cookies. Or
Right.
you eat the whole bag of cookies and then eat the whole bag of chips and everything else, because that day is spent, you've had a cookie. And that takes a really long time to get over.
Right. And I see that as well in fertility, that where people get on these fertility diets, obsessing about them because they think this is what's going to change my path to getting pregnant. And so they're like, I can't eat dairy, I can't eat gluten, I can't eat sugar, blah, blah, blah. And
Hmm.
then their stress level is off the charts because they're not doing anything socially because they think that they need to be doing this, that, and whatever in order to obtain conception. But really, the amount of stress that that's causing is counteracting what really their body should be doing. And I always kind of go back to fertility specifically, that it's more about what your body has sensitivities to or kind of allergies to that we want to avoid, not necessarily just a blanket statement of fertility friendly foods, right? And I think that's again where you're saying this obsession comes, and it becomes so stressful to try to put yourself in this box. And you're, for some people, they're not used to living in that way, right? For those, some of us are, that's how we were raised. But for people that are now on this new train of trying to achieve something, whether that's weight loss or fertility or whatever, it it takes the mental strain, overrides the ability for your body to function normally.
Yeah, it's all consuming, and it's very isolating, like you said, when they're so focused on what they're eating and they can't do this, they can't do this, then you will avoid any temptation or being put in that. Years and years I did not, would not go to dinners, not go to social events. It was like, well, there's nothing for me to eat there, or I'm going to have to make a really special order, and everyone's going to, pick, wonder why I'm being so picky about what's on the plate. No dressing, no oil. And it, it's years and years you spend time by yourself, but you're also choosing that, and you think that's like what you want. No, because it's, there's a comfort in sitting in front of the TV and binging food for hours and being alone and sort of getting that fill and that high from that. And then, you're throwing it all up and you're exhausted and tired and you just want to sleep, and then you wake up and you're starved, and so you're famished and you are ready for another binge, and it just becomes this cycle. Yeah,
Right.
you also avoid everyone because you also don't want people commenting. You avoid any being around food. I remember at the start of my last the last station, we would have a lot of food segments, and I was at the beginning of my recovery, and it was just, I would just try to walk away from like all the food segments after the show. Just, I didn't want to be around it because I didn't want to be offered it. I didn't want to explain, no, I don't eat that. So
Right.
it's very isolating, and that's another thing. Hiding, isolating something. There's something that needs to be addressed, and a lot of times it takes professional help.
And that was going to be my next question, is advice for people that may have family members or themselves of maybe thinking. So the noticing, isolating, and avoiding, anything else that you would suggest for people to be aware of, either of their loved ones or themselves, to say, oh, maybe I actually do have an issue that needs to be addressed here?
Yeah, obviously the how you look is, people might notice drastic. I lost a ton of weight. That was the first sign that people noticed. But a lot of times people with eating disorders look perfectly normal. They, because they are eating a lot, there might be binge eating and, vomiting, but they're still retaining calories. Or maybe they're just binge eating. You can't really tell. If someone perfectly normal, most of the people I know with severe eating disorders look pretty normal.
Right.
uh, but um, I'm trying to think of the signs, because a lot of times you choose to be alone, so you're hiding all your signs. But I would, I mean, not to get like too graphic, but like I would eat a lot in my car, and I'd get out and throw it in a trash can. So it's not like wrappers weren't ever in my house. But people, close ones, especially parents and partners, they are aware that something's going on. If people are, whenever you're at a restaurant, how people order, I almost can always tell that there's something deeper how they order. And if they're dabbing their food or really
Oh,
only smushing their food around. Uh, the other
interesting.
thing, yeah.
As far as like from your perspective to now, like not necessarily analyze people, but to be able to have that awareness to be like, hmm.
Oh yeah, analyzing menus. If I did have to go out, knowing which salad I would get and which dressing that I would have to have on the side, and dabbing like any foods with napkins if there was like oil, or hopefully there was no butter on it. You really, there's what you would say bad foods, which you have people with eating disorders have a list of bad foods that they just simply will not eat. Like, they're the trigger foods. If you notice someone will not take a bite of something no matter what, even for like a celebration, a birthday party, that was a big thing. I remember like one birthday, my loving former in-laws like made me like cut up fruit, because they knew I would not be eating cake, and put a candle on it, and like an apple or something.
Oh,
um but yeah, a lot of isolating, avoiding, not wanting to talk about it if someone brings it up. I was always so defensive. I would always say, I would always sort of gaslight people and say that they were overreacting, or um,
Right.
I knew what I was doing. I was in control. Meanwhile, you're totally out of control, but you think you're in control.
Right. This false sense of what it is that you're doing, I would imagine, to
Hmm.
stay in that space. Well, I'm glad that you're on the other side of it. 9 years. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's a long
Yeah,
time.
I'm definitely on the other side. I mean, I'm still conscious, but yeah, as far as like what I will eat and where I can go, I don't let that limit me. I go out a lot now, and I can always find something. And yeah, maybe there are still foods where I'm like, I probably won't have a full piece of cake, just because I know personally, like I would rather fill up on something else. But that's also like the nutrition mindset I learned. Like
Right.
I'll have a bite here and there, and then fill up on like a big protein or vegetables, or stuff like that. So it's moderation. The thing is, you don't when you have an eating disorder and you're recovering, you're always conscious that you could go overboard. So you sort of know your limits a bit more and what your body is going to feel like afterwards. So maybe
Right.
something is delicious, but you also have the foresight to know afterward, I'm going to feel lethargic and like kind of gross. And like cheese, it's not like bad for you at all. I just, how it makes me feel afterward, I would rather just avoid it.
Right. And
So
it's
you learn your body more.
Yeah, I think that's the key for everybody. And that's back to my kids, what I try to teach them now. It's like, what is your body telling you? Are you
Mhm.
finished eating or do you want more? Rather than like you have to eat everything that's there or whatever. Like listen to your tummy. What does it say? Because that consciousness and awareness with our own bodies, I feel like in our society for the most part is basically not acknowledged, right? This is what you paid for. So it's either amount of like not wasting food or not wasting money or whatever. It has nothing to do with listening to your own body of like, is this what feels good for me? And this is what I want to eat, So
Yeah.
I think it's really great that you're at that point now to know just for yourself of what makes you feel good and what doesn't, and be able to make those decisions. I'm sure it's always going to be a little bit of a struggle, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think for any of us who have gone through something like that, I had body dysmorphic, it's always a little bit there, but certainly not where it was at the height of things, right? So you always have this consciousness about it, but it's not change like ruling your
Yeah.
life, so to speak, I guess,
Yeah.
for
It
lack
doesn't
of a better
rule.
term.
You're not, I used to keep tabulations of calories and everything. So
Same.
like an app where I would look up everything, and you just know yourself more, you know what you can handle, and you're not worried if you eat this, then you need to go to the gym for an hour afterward. Like tomorrow's a new day, and you know when to stop. You know when to stop.
Right.
And yeah, you don't let it
Yes.
rule you. Yeah. There's bigger priorities in life too. That's another thing as you get older. I can't I was worried, oh my gosh, am I going to be all throughout my 30s and then all my 40s? And because I have seen people that have dealt with it for decades and decades.
Right.
And it wears on
Well,
your mental capacity. You can't think clearly after a while. You're starved.
I mean, so many things. The list is really endless. And also then it takes on this physical side of things of breaking down your body, right? And I mean, that's a whole nother situation.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, well, thanks for your time today and being on and opening up about all of these things that letting us get some insight on the real backside of TV as well as
Thank you.
all the other goodness. How can people find you and follow you and see what you're up to?
Yeah, the best way is just on Instagram, producer_Kyle. And I'm on there, and I post a lot. A lot of it's work and a lot of fun folks that we have on the show. And then I've started to open up more about personal ramblings and videos on there as well.
Well, I know a lot of guys appreciate, just the fact of the openness of the conversations about your relationship and everything that you're going through. Because once we see one person step forward and be honest about it, it opens this door for people to feel okay to do it themselves. And I think that's really powerful. So good for you for doing it.
Thank you. Well, that's my hope. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
All
healing and
right.
sharing for sure.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks so much, Kyle. We'll talk
Thank
soon.
you. Yeah, we will talk soon. Bye, Elizabeth.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Creation Innovation Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Spotify for free episodes and subscribe to the Creation Innovation Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you choose to get your podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening for a chance to receive a special gift. Yes, we actually do send out gifts. It's my favorite thing to do. So visit us at elizabethking.com/creation innovation for more information on how to enter. Every review counts, and we are so grateful. You can follow me at the official Elizabeth King on Instagram or TikTok. Until next time.